is when we look at where the Cavs are after 14 games, 7-7, which is a huge upgrade from the two previous years, and we will show you graphically what it is. So last 2 years, their seventh win came at game number 28. This year it comes after game 14. The ironic part of that is the last year LeBron was here when they got swept by the Golden State Warriors, 2017, 2018. They were 7-7 after 14 games. So I'm not saying they're going to the NBA Finals, but it is time, as we said earlier, that you start to say this is a legitimate, bottom of the playoff tier team, as long as they keep playing like they have, which is very possible. They may even get better because they're all young.
And they may get better too, Dave, because they're getting important pieces back from the injury list. That's the thing to me that stands out the most about this 7-7 start for the Cavs. They have the second most games missed due to injury in the entire NBA. And we're not talking about just missing back end of the bench pieces, right? We're talking about missing Darius Garland, the only true point guard that the Cavs have on the roster that was healthy at one point in time. The Cavs have played more games, Dave, without a point guard this year than with one. Think about that. And Kevin Love has played one full game and 10 minutes, right? And Colin Sexton missed 5 games. And you have all these different injuries to all of these important players, and yet the Cavs have found a way to make it work. Yeah, they went into that lull for about a week and a half where the injuries were just too much, and it looked like they were going to start to fade. But here they are. They're still in the mix. They're still fighting. They're still showing the ability to overcome adversity. And you got to give a lot of credit, one, to general manager Koby Altman for assembling the depth that he has to overcome some of these injuries that the Cavs have had early on in the season. And you absolutely have to give a ton of credit to JB Bickerstaff and the entire coaching staff for finding a way to just piece it together and keep this team afloat and make the necessary adjustments in the face of so much adversity. It's unbelievable to me, given everything that the Cavs have dealt with going back to the offseason, that they're here with a 500 record.
The other thing is this young core, it isn't like you got lucky with the lottery ball. In a lot of instances, you got very unlucky with it. Garland was the 5th pick, Sexton the 8th pick. So you also have to credit, and Okoro looks like a player as well, what they needed. So they kind of had a blueprint and a thought process, and I know it's still early, but it looks like they got it right with some of those picks that were middle to bottom part of the lottery, which is not easy to do.
You're right about that, Dave. If you think about it, the quote-unquote Brooklyn pick that came in the blockbuster trade for Kyrie Irving was supposed to be one of the highest picks going into that year. It was one of the most valuable picks, and a lot of people around the NBA, Dave, felt like the Cavs couldn't get that pick from the Boston Celtics because Boston was clutching onto that because they expected it to be a top 3 pick. All of a sudden, Spencer Dinwiddie in Brooklyn goes on this great run towards the end of the season, and it falls to number 8. And that was supposed to be a 7-player draft. That's what everybody kept saying. There was a huge drop-off after Wendell Carter Jr., and yet the Cavs got Colin Sexton with the 8th pick. And he hasn't been Trae Young. He hasn't been Luka Doncic. But he has been very close to those guys in terms of what he's brought to this organization. He is now, with Kevin Porter Jr. out, he now has to be the cornerstone of this entire rebuild. And look, losing KPJ is a huge setback for this organization when it comes to the rebuild, Dave. There's no doubt about it. There were people inside this organization that thought he was the one. He was the most talented of all the young guys. He was the one that they stole at the end of the first round. He was the one that was going to change the trajectory. Well, he's no longer here. So now it's going to be up to Colin Sexton, Darius Garland, Jarrett Allen, Dylan Windler, and some of these other guys. And as we have seen with Colin Sexton, if he can continue to make that rise and he can continue on this trajectory, then all of a sudden the loss of Kevin Porter Jr. isn't going to be felt as much.